Unit 4, Section 4.3, Classification of Fingerprints. All right, so the first of the classifications of fingerprints is called a loop. Couple things that you're going to need to be able to identify. First is something that is called the core, and then what is known as deltas. So let's start with the core. It's the most easily identifiable. It's going to be the location where the ridge patterns circle around. So on this, see if you can identify where the core is located. And hopefully you indicated here. All right, that location is identified as the core. And then you have the deltas. Okay, deltas are going to be triangular convergences of the ridge pattern. So on this diagram, see if you can identify the delta. Probably a little easier to do, it's right over here. Okay, and what we identify as a loop, okay, is going to be entering and leaving the same way, same side. So you're going to see most of the ridges enter this way, circle around the core, and exit out the same way. Because that's the overall trend of that. Now in a loop, there are two types. There's what is called a radial and an ulnar loop. This has to do with the radius and ulna of the human forearm. If you know the radius, that is located by the thumb, and the ulna is located near the little finger. Now, in order to read something as radial or ulnar, you do need to know which, if it was a right-handed loop or right-handed print or a left-handed print, and that's going to make a difference. So this print, try to figure out for real quick, is this one a radial or ulnar, starting with the, let's say, right hand. So if the right hand left this, okay, is this towards the radius or towards the ulna? It's kind of tricky. If it's left by the right hand, if you put your right hand kind of on top of the screen with your right thumb on the print, okay, these are going to be pointing, okay, this print is from this finger. So facing up, these ridges enter and leave from this side, okay, and asking which side it opens towards. Okay, it is opening. Right here is it's opening towards this direction. Okay, so this is going to be considered an ulnar loop as opposed to a radial loop. Okay, a little tricky. And then obviously, if the hand was flipped, it would be the opposite. Now, sometimes you don't know, in which case we just refer to it as a left slant or a right slant loop. Relatively self-explanatory. Top one here, up, it comes in this way and up and out. Okay, so that is a left slant, and then this one is a right slant. Again, if you can identify the core and the delta in each one, you have the core top left here, and then the delta is right there. And then on the bottom one, there's a core right around here, and then you see one more delta there. Again, two more examples. On your own, identify which side it enters and leaves, and then determine, see if you can identify the core and the delta. So do that now. And then also, let's see if you're able to identify, let's say these are both left-handed. So if these are both left by a left hand, which one is radial and which one is ulnar? And remember, we're talking about the side it opens towards. Okay, hopefully you're able to do that while I was sitting there quietly waiting for you to do something, hoping that you were doing it. This one comes out like this. So the opening is here. If this is a left hand, it's a fat hand, okay, this opens towards the thumb, all right, and that would make it the radial, and then this obviously then would be the opposite. That would open this direction, which would make it ulnar for the left hand. All right, the next type is called a whorl. It's more fun if you add the H to it. Go ahead and try it. Say whorl. Okay, now actually say it out loud. Say whorl. I hope you're next to somebody, and I hope they just looked at you funny. All right, so a whorl has 2 deltas and a single core, and there are 4 types of whorls. You have a regular whorl, a central pocket, a double whorl, and an accidental whorl. So on this one, let's identify the parts. 2 deltas, these are going to be those triangular spots of the ridge pattern, so hopefully you can see that there. There's one on the left here. There's one on the right here. And then there is a single core, and it's much more easily identifiable as an actual core if you think of like the eye of a hurricane, and it's right there in the middle. All right, again, another sample here. It does the loops, the ridge makes a complete circuit. A double loop is obviously going to be 2 loops. It's called a double loop or a double whorl. I'll show you that on the next slide. Accidental is not covered by any other pattern category. It's kind of like the leftovers compartment. If something just really bizarre doesn't fit one of the standard profiles, it's called an accidental. So then over here, hopefully you should be able to see, you have delta, delta, and core. So here are the 4 types. You have a plain whorl at the top left, a central pocket whorl. I'm going to stop on this one because this one is kind of unique looking. So I'll identify the parts here. You see there's a delta here. There's another delta here. And you still have that core, so by definition that's making this a whorl. But it also has ridge patterns that enter one side and leave out the same side. So there is certainly some whorl pattern, a circular pattern here, but it also has this feature of a loop, okay, which makes this a central pocket whorl. So there's a little whorl that's in a pocket inside a loop. The double whorl here, I always look at this one, I think of it like if you grabbed a t-shirt and twisted it, like if you guys were in chemistry with tie-dye, but you'll see it circles around this way, and then it circles around this way. And it's forming like this twister pattern. So that's a double whorl, double loop, but we're calling it a double whorl. And then accidental is over here. There's one delta here. There's kind of something going on up in here, and then there's a core there as well. It's just kind of a weird leftover. It's just not perfectly identifiable. You know, you got the ridges arching over here. You have a couple that are looping through, so it's just kind of a hot mess of a print. They don't always look just like this, though. For example, in this one, this accidental at the bottom right, delta, delta, delta. And then it's got this like funny jelly bean looking thing going on here, right in the middle. Okay, so that is an accidental. And then you see the other 3 here. So for practice, again, the double, doing this twisty pattern, the central pocket with that extra loop feature around the core, and then just the plain whorl right there. Arches. So these are the least common of all the types. Loops were the most common. Whorls were second, and then arches by far and away the least common. This is where the ridge patterns go in one side and then just straight out the other side. There are 2 types of these, and the 2 types are plain versus tented. They typically don't have deltas, though you could argue that a tented arch has a delta there inserted in it, but a regular arch has no delta, has no core, has none of those unique features, just straight across lines. So here you see, again, you see this guy, that's a regular arch, but then down here you see this actually does kind of have a little delta going on in the middle. Okay, so this is a tented arch, goes up a little bit higher. You still got the same thing at the bottom there, those guys going across, but it peaks a little bit higher and it has a delta in the center. So here's just looking at one more example, and I think here it's side by side, really obvious. You can see the presence of this pinched up delta region right in the middle. So that's it for today. Next up is going to be the ridge details, the ridge characteristics, and the minutia. So here we go.